I was driving back from the estate attorney's office, on cloud nine, ready to tell my son that my brother, who had no children of his own, had left me his entire farm and a bank account with a balance in the millions. But as I pulled up to the house, I heard the voices of my son Mason and my daughter-in-law Harper drifting out through the open window, and I froze. I was horrified, completely and utterly horrified, because what came out of that window weren't words of love or affection or anything resembling the family I thought we were. They were daggers. They were pure poison distilled into every single syllable. I stood there, paralyzed in my own front yard, the documents from the attorney trembling in my hands, while my entire world crumbled in a matter of seconds. Let me back up just a few minutes, because you need to understand the cruel irony of this moment. You need to understand that I had been floating, literally floating on a cloud of happiness that I hadn't felt in decades. I had just walked out of the estate attorney's office at 4:30 in the afternoon, and the sun was still shining with that golden October light that makes everything look like a movie. The lawyer, a serious man with thick glasses and a monotone voice, had spoken the words I never imagined I'd hear. "Miss Eleanor, your brother Arthur has left you everything in his will. The 500-acre farm, the main farmhouse, the arable land, and a bank account with a balance of $850,000. $850,000, at 68 years old. After a lifetime of breaking my back, sacrificing everything, living paycheck to paycheck, suddenly, out of nowhere, salvation, financial freedom, the end of all my worries. I signed the papers with shaking hands, shoved everything into a manila folder that I clutched to my chest as if it were the most valuable treasure in the universe, and walked out of there, feeling that for the first time in my existence, God was smiling at me. For the first time, after so much loss, so many tears, so much pain, something good was happening to me. Something huge. Something that would change everything. I drove the 20 minutes to my house with a goofy smile plastered on my face. I couldn't stop imagining the scene. I would arrive, open the door, find Mason and Harper in the living room, and tell them with feigned calm, "I have something to tell you." I imagined their faces full of curiosity. Then the revelation, the screams of joy, the hugs, the tears of happiness. My son lifting me off the ground like he did when he was young. Harper crying with emotion, that daughter-in-law I always treated like my own flesh and blood. The three of us hugging, planning the future, dreaming together. Finally, after 3 years of them living with me in my small house because they were in financial trouble, I could truly help them, buy them a house of their own, fund Mason's photography business, give Harper that trip she always mentioned, be the matriarch who rescues her family. The scent of honeysuckle drifted in through the car window, mixing with the smell of damp earth from the last rain. Everything seemed perfect, blessed, as if the universe were finally compensating for decades of suffering. Because I had suffered. God knows I had suffered. I was widowed at 30 with a 4-year-old boy in my arms. My husband died in a stupid accident, crushed by a truck that ran a stop sign. Overnight I was left alone, with no income, no plan, with a child who looked at me with those huge eyes, not understanding why Daddy wasn't coming home. And do you know what I did? I didn't crumble. I didn't give myself the luxury of crumbling. I worked 3 jobs simultaneously for years. I cleaned houses at 5 in the morning, worked retail from 8 to 4, and did alterations and sewing at night until my eyes closed from exhaustion. I slept 4 hours, if I was lucky. My hands were destroyed, rough as sandpaper, scarred by needles and cleaning chemicals. But Mason never went hungry. He never lacked for anything. I gave him an education, college, opportunities. I sold my mother's jewelry, the only pieces I had, to pay for his degree. I never remarried, even though I had suitors, because all my energy, all my love, all my time, I gave to him, only to him. When he met Harper 10 years ago, I thought my sacrifice had finally been worth it. She was an educated girl, sweet, who seemed to genuinely love him. She treated me well, called me on the phone, included me in their plans. When they got married 7 years ago, I cried tears of happiness at that wedding, which I financed myself by draining 3 years of savings. I thought, finally my son has a partner. Finally, he won't be alone when I'm gone. I helped them with the down payment on their first apartment. I bought them furniture. I paid for their honeymoon, all with a smile, because for me there was no greater joy than seeing them happy. 3 years ago, when they knocked on my door with suitcases and defeated faces because they had lost their jobs and couldn't pay rent, I opened my home without thinking twice. "Stay as long as you need," I told them. My house was small, modest, with a leaky roof and pipes that made strange noises, but it was theirs. I never charged them a cent, never asked them to contribute to the bills. On the contrary, I kept helping them with the little I had from my miserable Social Security check. I cooked for them, washed their clothes, tried to make life more bearable for them. Because that was me, a mother who sacrifices until her last breath. And now, with this $1 million inheritance, I could finally do everything I always dreamed of for them. Fix the house, buy them a new car, fund Mason's dreams, give Harper the comfortable life she deserved. My happiness was completely intertwined with theirs. That's what I thought as I parked my old sedan in front of the house. That's what I believed when I got out with my purse and that manila folder pressed tight against my chest. But then, something changed. A strange silence wrapped around me when I stepped onto the front lawn, a sensation in my stomach, like a primal warning, something my body knew before my mind did. The front door was ajar, as always. The living room window open, and from that window facing the front, voices drifted out. The voices of my son and my daughter-in-law. They were speaking in a tone I had never heard from them. Conspiratorial, urgent, cruel. I stopped 10 feet from the door. I don't know why. Something told me not to go in yet. To listen first. And then the words reached my ears with brutal clarity, as if the universe wanted to ensure I didn't miss a single syllable. "I can't take it anymore, Mason. I can't keep pretending I care about that old woman." It was Harper's voice, my sweet daughter-in-law, but it sounded different, filled with disdain, filled with hate. Every day that passes is more unbearable. Her constant complaining, her smell of mothballs, the way she chews her food. It makes me want to vomit. My heart stopped. I literally felt it stop in my chest. And the voice of my son, my Mason, the boy I carried in my womb, whom I nursed, whom I raised alone with blood and tears, responded with a dry laugh I had never heard before. "I know, babe. Believe me, I know. But we have to hold on a little longer. It's our house, technically. She's not going to live forever." The words came out of his mouth so naturally, so coldly, that I felt the ground opening up beneath my feet. My legs began to tremble. The manila folder slipped a little through my sweaty fingers, but I couldn't move. I was rooted there, like a tree with roots piercing the concrete, forced to listen to my own destruction. "A little longer?" Harper's voice rose in pitch, full of frustration. "Mason, it's been 3 years. 3 years of my life wasted, living with that woman who thinks she's a saint because she put a roof over our heads, as if we were begging for charity. This house should be ours, completely ours. Without her invading every space, without having to fake affection every damn morning. I'm sick of her repetitive stories about how much she suffered, how much she sacrificed. We know. We get it. But that doesn't make us her slaves forever." Every word was a direct punch to the gut. I felt nauseous. I felt the air turning dense, unbreathable. The scent of honeysuckle that seemed beautiful moments ago was now choking me. Invader? In my own house? The house I bought with the sweat of 3 simultaneous jobs? The house where I welcomed them with open arms when they didn't have a pot to piss in? "You're right," said Mason, and his agreement was worse than any direct insult. "But think about the practical side. If we kick her out now, we'll look like the villains to the whole family, to the neighbors. You know how people are. Besides, she has the deed to the house in her name. We can't do anything legally. But if we wait, if we are patient, when she goes, everything will be ours automatically. I'm an only child. There's no one else. And what if she takes years to die?" Harper's question sounded like they were discussing how long a package would take to arrive. Not my life, not my existence. "Your mother is like a cockroach, old, but resilient. She could live until she's 90. I'm not going to waste another 20 years of my life waiting. 20 years. They talked about my death as if it were a pending transaction, as if I were an obstacle between them and their happiness. The manila folder was shaking violently in my hands now. Inside were documents certifying $850,000, an entire estate, a brilliant future, and I had come running to share it with them, with these two people who, at this very moment, were planning how to get rid of me. "There are options," Mason said in a low voice, almost a whisper, but the afternoon silence carried his words directly to my ears as if he were screaming them. "Nursing homes aren't that expensive. I've been researching. There's one on the outskirts, halfway decent, for like $2,000 a month. We could tell her it's for her own good, that she can't take care of herself anymore, that we're worried she'll fall and break something being here alone all day." "But she's not alone all day. We're here." Harper's voice sounded confused. "That's why we'd have to get jobs first, right? To have the perfect excuse. Mom, we can't take care of you anymore because we work all day. It's for your safety." The way he imitated a worried, loving voice made me feel a disgust so deep I had to cover my mouth with my hand to not vomit right there in the yard. "You're a genius," Harper laughed, and her laugh sounded genuinely amused, as if my son had just told the best joke in the world. $2,000 a month is nothing compared to getting our privacy back. We could remodel her room, turn it into an office for you, or a walk-in closet for me. God knows I need it. And finally, we could have the house how we want it, without her horrible ceramic knickknacks everywhere, without her crocheted doilies on every piece of furniture. The doilies I crocheted by hand for years, on those endless nights after doing alterations for others, because I wanted my house to look nice despite being poor. The ceramic figurines I bought one by one at flea markets, on my days off, because it was the only thing I could afford to decorate with. All that I had built with so much love, reduced to garbage in their eyes. And what about her social security? The true interest. It had always been about the money. If we put her in a home, could we keep part of her check? I mean, we'd be paying for the place. Technically, we'd be taking care of her. Her check is a pittance, like $1,200 a month. It would barely cover half the nursing home. Mason sounded disappointed, as if he were doing mental math and the numbers didn't add up. "But once she's there, we could sell some of her furniture, her things. That antique dresser in her room must be worth something, and she has some jewelry stored away, I think." I didn't have jewelry. I sold it all decades ago to pay for his damn college tuition. But they didn't even know that. I never told them the details of my sacrifices because I didn't want them to feel indebted to me. How stupid I was. How incredibly stupid. "The problem is convincing her," Harper said, and I could picture her biting her lower lip like she did when she was thinking. "She's stubborn. She's going to say she's perfectly fine, that she can take care of herself. She's going to cry, make us feel guilty with her stories of sacrifice. That's why we have to be strategic." Mason's voice took on a calculating tone that froze my blood. "We start, little by little. We point out her memory lapses, her little confusions. Mom, you already told me that story 3 times today. Are you okay? Mom, you left the stove on again. It's dangerous." Even if it's not true, we make her doubt herself. And when she's insecure enough, we present the nursing home as the only logical option. Gaslighting. My own son was planning to gaslight me, to convince me I was losing my mind, to psychologically manipulate me until I broke. Tears began to roll down my cheeks. Hot, bitter, silent. But I didn't make a sound. I couldn't make a sound. I had to hear everything. I had to know exactly what these two people I loved with all my being had turned into. "And if she resists anyway?" Harper's question floated in the air. There was a silence. A long, heavy silence that lasted maybe 5 seconds, but felt like an eternity. And then Mason spoke, and his words were the final stab. "Then we wait. Nature takes its course. And let's be honest, if she got seriously ill, it's not like we're going to spend a fortune on treatments. She's lived her life. She's had her years." "You're right," Harper sighed, as if they had just solved a complicated math problem. "Either way, in a few years this solves itself. And in the meantime, we keep smiling and enduring." My knees almost gave out. I had to lean against the porch column to keep from falling to the ground. The world spun around me in a nauseating spiral of betrayal and pain. These two people, my son and my daughter-in-law, were discussing my death like someone discussing the dinner menu, with that same coldness, with that same indifference. And the worst, The absolute worst is that I had literally come skipping with joy to share with them a fortune that would change our lives. A fortune I planned to use primarily to help them, to give them everything they hadn't been able to have. The irony was so cruel it almost made me laugh. Almost. If it weren't for the fact that I felt like they were ripping my heart out with their bare hands, I might have found some twisted humor in the situation. Here I was, with certified documents for $850,000 in my purse, listening to how they planned to stick me in a cheap nursing home and keep my miserable $1,200 Social Security check. If they knew. If they only knew what I was holding. But they weren't going to know. Not yet. Because something inside me, something primal and fierce that I didn't know I possessed, had just awakened. Well, enough talking about your mother, Harper said with a lighter tone, as if they had just finished discussing the weather. What do you want for dinner? Because I am not cooking. Let her do it when she gets here. That's what she's good for, right? At least let her earn her keep. They laughed. Both of them laughed. And that sound, those shared cackles at the expense of my humiliation, finally broke something fundamental inside me. For 68 years I had been Eleanor the good, Eleanor the self-sacrificing, Eleanor the forgiving, the understanding, the one who always puts others first. The one who worked until she destroyed her body so her son could have a future. The one who never asked for anything in return because a mother's love is supposed to be unconditional, selfless, eternal. But in that moment, standing in my own front yard, listening to the two people I loved most in the world plan to discard me like trash, something changed. A chemical, molecular, spiritual transformation. The sweet and understanding Eleanor died right there, and in her place, someone new was born, someone cold, someone calculating, someone who had just learned that boundless kindness is just another form of being stupid. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with that air that now tasted like ash. I adjusted the manila folder under my arm. I checked my reflection in the car window. Red eyes, yes, but nothing a little cold water couldn't hide. I needed to walk into that house as if I hadn't heard a thing. I needed to act. And for the first time in my life, acting didn't mean being authentic and honest, but being the best liar in the world. I walked toward the door with measured, controlled steps. I inserted the key with hands that no longer trembled with emotion, but with an icy fury that ran through my veins like mercury. I opened the door and closed it with the usual sound. Not too loud, not too soft. "I'm home," I yelled with the most cheerful voice I could manufacture. That loving mother voice I had perfected over decades. I heard them moving in the living room. Hurried footsteps, whispers. When I entered the shared space, there they were. Mason on the ivory sofa I bought myself 10 years ago, Harper in the armchair, both with their phones in their hands, the perfect picture of domestic innocence. They greeted me with smiles, wide, warm, completely fake smiles. And I, who now knew the truth, could see the lie behind every forced facial muscle. "Mom, how did it go?" Mason stood up and walked toward me with open arms. My son, my baby, the boy I nursed, whom I cured when he had chickenpox, whom I taught to ride a bike, whom I consoled when his first love rejected him. That same boy was now a stranger with my son's face, approaching to give me a hug I knew he didn't feel. I hugged him. God, how hard it was to hug him, feeling his arms around me, his familiar smell of that cheap cologne he used, and knowing that minutes before he was planning how to get rid of me. But I did it. I endured, because I needed them to believe everything was normal. Good, son. Everything is good. My voice came out surprisingly steady. Years of hiding pain had trained me for this without knowing it. And you guys? How was your day? Quiet. Harper stood up too, approached, and gave me a peck on the cheek. Her perfume, the one I gave her for her last birthday because she mentioned she liked it, hit me like a punch. We were looking at some stuff online, planning some ideas for Mason's business, planning how to lock me up in a home. That's what they were planning. But I smiled. "That's great, honey. I'm glad you're being productive." The word honey almost choked me. I had called this woman my daughter for 7 years. I treated her better than many mothers treat their own biological daughters. And she called me a cockroach when she thought I wasn't listening. "Do you want me to make you some tea, Mom? You look tired." Mason looked at me with that expression of concern that I now knew was pure theater. He was probably already practicing for when he would start his plan to make me think I was losing my mind. No thanks. Sweetheart, I'm fine. I sat in my favorite chair, that wooden rocker I rescued from a flea market, and restored myself. I set my purse to the side, careful that the manila folder wasn't visible. They didn't ask what was inside. They didn't ask why I had gone to the lawyer. They didn't even remember that today was my appointment. Of course not. I was just the old piece of furniture in the living room, present but invisible. Mom. Harper started with that sweet voice I now recognized as completely fabricated. I was thinking that tomorrow we could go to the mall together. You know, spend some quality time. It's been a long time since we went out. Just you and me. Quality time. With the woman who half an hour ago said my mothball smell made her want to vomit. I would love that, Harper. That would be very nice. The words came out of my mouth as if someone else were saying them. As if I were an actress following a script. I watched them for the next hour. I really watched them, as if seeing them for the first time. Mason was 39, but he had never fully matured. He still had that teenage attitude, expecting things to fall from the sky. His photography business, which he talked about constantly, was more of a fantasy than a reality. He had taken maybe 20 jobs in 3 years. But I always encouraged him. Always told him it was just a matter of time, of effort. Now I realized I had spoiled him. I gave him so much, forgave him so much, that he never learned the real value of things, nor respect for the person who gave them to him. And Harper, 36, pretty in a conventional way, with that long brown hair she cared for religiously, and those nails always perfect despite not working. How did I not see the shallowness before? How did I not notice that every conversation we had ended up revolving around material things? What she didn't have, what she wanted. When she lost her job 3 years ago, I consoled her. Don't worry, honey, something better will come along. But nothing ever came, because she never looked for anything. She got comfortable in my house, eating my food, enjoying my hospitality, and began to see me not as a blessing but as an obstacle. We ate dinner together that night. I cooked, as always. I made chicken parmesan with spaghetti, one of Mason's favorite dishes. I set the table. I served. I watched them eat what I prepared with my hands while they chatted about a show they were binging, about a friend who posted vacation photos, about absolute trivialities. They didn't ask about my day. They didn't ask what I had done. I was the service staff, not part of the family. After dinner, I washed the dishes while they settled back into the living room. I heard their laughter, the sound of the TV, that domestic normality that now seemed obscene to me. My hands moved automatically, scrubbing every plate, every glass, while my brain processed everything I had heard. $850,000 were waiting in a bank account with my name on it. An entire farm I could sell or manage, and they didn't have the slightest clue. I dried my hands with the kitchen towel and stared out the window toward the backyard. Night had fallen completely, and only the dark silhouettes of the trees swaying in the breeze were visible. I remembered all the times I worked in that garden, planting flowers, pulling weeds, trying to create a beautiful space despite our economic situation. I remembered the mornings I watered the plants before leaving to clean other people's houses, thinking that at least my family would have a cozy home to return to. How naive, how stupidly naive. My mind began to work in a new way, calculating, cold. If they could plan, so could I. If they could fake love while conspiring behind my back, I could fake ignorance while assembling my own strategy. But first I needed to confirm something. I needed to make sure that what I heard wasn't an isolated conversation, a moment of frustration that didn't reflect their true feelings. Although deep down I knew the truth. No one speaks with that level of detail, with that specific coldness, if it's just a momentary venting. That night I went to sleep early, as always. I'm tired, kids. I'll leave you watching your show. I said goodbye with kisses on the forehead for both, and they barely looked up from the screen. I went up the stairs to my room, that small room on the second floor that had been mine since we bought this house 20 years ago. I sat on the edge of my bed and took the manila folder out of my purse. There were all the documents, the deed to the farm in my name, the bank papers certifying the account balance, The testamentary letter from my brother Arthur, written in his own hand 2 months before dying, explaining why he left me everything. Because you were the only one who was always there when I needed you, even though you never asked for anything. Because I admire you more than anyone in this world. Because you deserve something good after so much suffering. Tears began to fall on the paper, smudging the ink. My brother, that quiet and solitary man, knew me better than my own son knew me. I put the documents in the back of my closet, under a pile of old sweaters they never checked because they didn't care enough to snoop through my things. I lay in the dark with my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in decades, I allowed resentment to flow freely through my veins. I didn't repress it. I didn't rationalize it. I didn't look for excuses to justify their behavior. I just felt it, pure and burning. I remembered the day Mason was born, 39 years ago. It was a difficult birth, 23 hours of labor. When they finally put him in my arms, crying and wrinkled, I swore I would do everything for him. Everything. And I kept that promise to the point of losing myself in the process. I never went back to school, even though I had dreamed of being a teacher. I never pursued my own dreams because all my energy went into funding his. I never gave myself permission to be selfish, not even for a moment. And for what? To raise a man who planned to lock me in a cheap nursing home and keep my $1,200 pension. A man who had calculated how much my antique dresser would be worth. A man who literally said he wouldn't spend money on treatments if I got seriously ill because I had already lived my life. The rage I felt in that moment was different from anything I had experienced before. It wasn't hot or explosive. It was cold, dense, heavy as lead. It settled in my chest and stayed there, slowly transforming into something more useful. Determination. If they could be cruel, I could be relentless. If they could plan my end, I could plan their awakening. Not their death, of course. I wasn't like them. But certainly their reality check. Their moment of truth. Their downfall. The next 3 days were an acting exercise that deserved an award. I got up every morning and played my role of loving mother with surgical precision. I made breakfasts. I cleaned the house. I washed their clothes. I smiled when they talked to me. I nodded when they told me their insignificant plans. And all the while, behind my eyes, there was a machine calculating, measuring, planning. I observed them like a scientist observes specimens in a lab. I noticed how Harper spoke to me with that exaggerated sweetness people use when trying to manipulate someone they considered dumb. I noticed how Mason asked about my health with a new insistence, probably already starting his strategy to make me doubt myself. "Did you sleep well, Mom? I heard you get up 3 times to go to the bathroom last night. Are you sure you're okay?" I never got up 3 times. He was lying, planting seeds of confusion. On the 4th day, I made a decision. I couldn't go on like this indefinitely, living in this farce, pretending I didn't know what I knew. I needed to confirm just how far their betrayal went, and I needed to do it in a way that gave me absolute advantage. So I did something I had never done in my life. I acted with cunning. That afternoon, I announced I would go visit my friend Linda, who lived on the other side of town. "I'll probably be back late, don't wait up." This was unusual. I almost never went out at night. I saw how they looked at each other, how their eyes lit up with that barely disguised joy of having the house to themselves. I left with my purse and drove to the corner. I parked the car on the parallel street, where they couldn't see it from the house, and stealthily walked back. I entered through the back garden door, the one we never used and that I knew they wouldn't lock. I stayed in the kitchen, in the shadows, completely still, barely breathing. I didn't have to wait long. Within 15 minutes they started talking, this time without whispers, without precautions, with the confidence of someone who believes they are completely alone. "Thank God she left," Harper said with a dramatic sigh. I couldn't stand another minute of pretending. My face hurts from smiling so much. "I know, babe, but you're doing great." Mason's voice sounded proud. "In a few more weeks we start phase 2 of the plan. I've already investigated 3 facilities. The cheapest one is on the outskirts, like I told you. $2,000 a month. With her Social Security, it almost covers it. And when will we tell her?" Harper sounded anxious, like a child waiting to open Christmas presents. "Soon, But first, I need her to sign some papers. My blood ran cold. There's a lawyer a friend recommended. He says I can get her to sign a power of attorney claiming it's to make things easier for her, so I can handle paperwork for her because at her age, it's complicated. Once I have that power, I can sell the house without her realizing it until it's too late. Sell my house. The house I bought with years of work. The house whose deed was in my name. They planned to legally defraud me, strip me of the only thing I had, and leave me in a nursing home with the bare minimum. The level of their betrayal had no bottom. You're brilliant. Harper laughed. And she'll sign just like that. She trusts me blindly. She would never question anything I asked her. The arrogance in his voice made me clench my fists until my nails dug into my palms. She's spent her whole life being the self-sacrificing martyr. She's too good for her own good. Too stupid. Stupid. My son called me stupid. That word echoed in my head like a church bell. Stupid. All those sleepless nights working to pay for his college. Stupid. All those times I skipped meals so he could eat well. Stupid. All those years sacrificing every personal desire, every dream, every chance at happiness. Stupid. Kindness interpreted as weakness. Unconditional love interpreted as naivety. I wasn't stupid. I was a mother who loved too much, someone who never deserved it. And what if she refuses to sign? Harper asked. And I could hear the noise of her moving on the sofa, probably cuddling up against my son like she always did. She won't refuse. But if she does, there's plan B. The lawyer also explained that I can claim senile dementia, get a couple of witnesses to say she's losing her memory, that she can't make decisions for herself. With that, I can request legal guardianship. It's more complicated and takes longer, but it works. Every word coming out of his mouth was a revelation of how far he was willing to go. My son was willing to destroy my reputation, to make me look like a demented old woman in front of authorities and acquaintances, just to steal what was mine. And wouldn't it be easier if she just died? Harper's question came out so naturally, like someone asking if it wouldn't be easier to order takeout instead of cooking. She wasn't really suggesting it, I know, but the fact that she could pronounce those words with such lightness showed me the abyss of her indifference toward my life. There was a silence that lasted too long. And then Mason spoke, and although his words were different from what Harper insinuated, the tone was just as chilling. Don't say that even as a joke. But honestly, sometimes I think it would be a relief for everyone. She's already old. She's completed her cycle. And we are in the prime of our lives, stuck taking care of someone who only drags us down. Drags us down. Me, who gave them a roof for free. Me, who cooked for them. Me, who paid the utility bills without asking them for a cent of contribution. I was dragging them down. The distortion of reality was so grotesque, it almost made me laugh. Almost. You're right. Sorry. Harper sighed. It's just that I'm so tired of all this. I want our life back. I want to be able to walk naked through the house if I feel like it without worrying that the old lady will show up. I want to decorate how I want, invite friends over, without having to warn them that there's a bitter old woman living here. I want privacy, freedom, space. Soon, babe. I promise you, soon. I heard the sound of a kiss. They were kissing while talking about discarding me, and that mental image was so repulsive I had to swallow the bile that rose in my throat. When are you going to ask her to sign the power of attorney? Harper asked after a moment. This week. I already have the documents. The lawyer prepared them with complicated technical language, so she doesn't really understand what she's signing. I'm going to tell her it's to help her with banking, so I can better assist her with her finances. She has no idea about laws. She'll sign without reading. The confidence in his voice was overwhelming. He really thought he knew me. He really thought he could manipulate me so easily. What he didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I had been married to a lawyer before he died. My late husband, Mason's father, taught me a lot about laws and contracts during our years together. He taught me to read the fine print, to never sign anything without understanding it completely, to protect myself legally. Ironic that the father's lessons were going to protect me from the son. You're so smart, Harper cooed, and the tone of admiration in her voice toward someone planning to defraud his own mother made me nauseous. And after selling the house, what will we do with the money? First, we pay off all our debts. We owe like $20,000 in credit cards. $20,000. I had no idea they had those debts. They never asked me for help. Then we buy a small condo for us, something modern in a good area. With what's left, we can travel, buy a decent car, finally live well. And your mother in the nursing home for $2,000 a month? The question had a hint of guilt, barely perceptible. She'll be fine. She'll have a roof, food, basic care. It's more than many have at her age. The way he justified the abandonment, as if he were doing me a favor, as if locking me in the cheapest option while they lived off my house money was an act of generosity, made me understand something fundamental. My son wasn't just selfish or immature, he was cruel. There was an inherent cruelty in his character that I never wanted to see because motherly love blinded me. I guess you're right, Harper said, though she didn't sound completely convinced. I just hope she doesn't make a scene when we tell her. She won't. I know her. She'll cry. Yes. She'll say we're abandoning her, that after everything she did for me, she'll do her little victim act. But in the end, she'll accept it because she has no other choice. She has no money of her own. She has nowhere to go. She has no real friends who can help her. She is completely alone in the world except for us. The way he analyzed my loneliness, my vulnerability, as if they were tools to be used against me, showed me a level of sociopathy I didn't know existed in him. But he was wrong. He was wrong about everything. I had $850,000. I had a farm. I had options he couldn't even imagine. And above all, I now had something I had never had before. Absolute clarity about who my son really was. I moved away from the kitchen as silently as I had arrived. I went out the back door and walked to my car. I sat in the driver's seat and just stayed there, in the dark, processing everything. I didn't cry. I had no tears left for them. In their place, I felt something more powerful. Resolution. I drove aimlessly for an hour, organizing my thoughts. I needed a perfect plan. I couldn't just confront them yet. I needed timing. I needed to maximize the impact. I needed to make sure they fully understood the magnitude of what they had lost. And above all, I needed to protect myself legally, so they couldn't hurt me even after everything exploded. The next morning I called the attorney. I need to update my will urgently. The lawyer, the same man with thick glasses who had given me the news of the inheritance, received me that same afternoon. I explained the situation without going into emotional details. Just facts. He listened with a neutral expression and then nodded. I understand perfectly, Miss Eleanor. Unfortunately, I see cases like this more often than I'd like. He drafted a new will, specifying that my son Mason was completely disinherited. Everything, absolutely everything, would go to a charity foundation helping single mothers in vulnerable situations. Women like I had been decades ago. I signed every page with cold satisfaction. I also need you to prepare a legal document revoking any authority anyone else might try to obtain over my assets or medical decisions, I told him. The lawyer prepared the corresponding papers. Everything was certified, sealed, legal, and irrevocable. Is there anything else I can do for you? The lawyer asked when we finished. Yes, I need you to recommend a good real estate agent. I'm going to sell my current house. His expression remained professional, but I saw a glint of approval in his eyes. He gave me 3 names of reliable agents. That night, I arrived home later than usual. Mason and Harper were eating dinner they had ordered for delivery, because of course, neither of them cooked. They looked at me with surprise when I entered. "Mom, where were you? You had us worried." The lie came out of Mason's mouth so fluidly. Worried. Surely they were worried I had died and ruined their plans to rob me while I was still breathing. I had some matters to resolve, son. Adult things. I said it with a sweet smile, but I emphasized the word adult as a reminder that I was the owner of this house and my own life. Even though they seemed to have forgotten, the following days were a masterpiece of strategic patience. Every morning I got up with a renewed purpose. While they slept in late, I was in contact with real estate agents, lawyers, accountants. I organized every detail of my new life as if I were assembling a complex puzzle where every piece had to fit perfectly. I visited the farm I inherited from Arthur, that beautiful land 2 hours from the city, with a main farmhouse that needed repairs but had incredible potential. I hired a manager to start working the land. I opened new bank accounts. I met with a financial advisor who almost fell off his chair when I told him the amount I needed to invest. Miss Eleanor, with this amount, and at your age, you can live very comfortably for the rest of your life without worries, the advisor told me. A young man in a gray suit who treated me with a respect I hadn't received in my own home for years. We can create a diversified portfolio that generates passive monthly income of at least $4,000, maybe $5,000 if we're conservative. $4,000 a month, while my son planned to rob me to keep my $1,200. The irony made me smile at the most unexpected moments. Sometimes I caught myself smiling while washing dishes or folding laundry, and Mason would ask me what was so funny. "Nothing, son. I'm just happy," I would answer. And it was true. I was happy. Happy in a dark and vindictive way, but happy nonetheless. The real estate agent I hired to sell my house was an efficient woman named Sarah, about 50, with that unstoppable energy of someone who loves her job. She came to evaluate the property on a Tuesday afternoon, when Mason and Harper had supposedly gone out to look for work, although I knew they were probably in a coffee shop spending the little money they had while waiting to steal mine. "It's a charming property, Miss Eleanor," Sarah said, walking through the rooms with her tablet in hand, taking notes and photos. "The location is excellent. The size is perfect for a young family. With some minor repairs, we could put it on the market for $320,000, maybe up to $350,000 if we find the right buyer." $320,000. The house I bought 20 years ago for $80,000, working like a slave, was now worth 4 times more, and my son planned to sell it out from under me, keep the money, and stick me in a dump of a nursing home. The rage I felt was so intense I had to sit down. "Are you okay?" Sarah approached with genuine concern. Yes, I'm just emotional. This house has a lot of memories." I wasn't lying. It had memories, some good, from when Mason was a child and still genuinely loved me, when we played in the yard and he hugged me before sleeping, and recent horrible memories of betrayal and cruelty. I understand perfectly. Selling a house is always an emotional process. Sarah patted me on the shoulder. "But I assure you we will find the perfect family for this place. When do you want to list it?" "As soon as possible. Let's say in 2 weeks. I needed that time to coordinate everything else, to ensure that when the hammer fell, it fell with deadly precision." "Perfect. I'll prepare all the documents." Sarah left with her tablet full of photos and measurements, leaving me alone in the house that soon would no longer be mine, but soon would also no longer be theirs. That night Mason finally made his move. I arrived from running errands and found him in the living room with a folder of documents on the coffee table. He had that rehearsed, serious expression, like an actor about to deliver his big monologue. "Mom, I need to speak with you about something important." He sat on the sofa and motioned for me to sit next to him. Harper appeared from the kitchen with 2 cups of tea, one for him and one for me, with that Judas smile. "Sure, son, tell me." I sat down and took the cup of tea, feigning absolute innocence. "Look, I've been thinking a lot about your situation." He began with that voice of feigned concern I now recognized perfectly. "You're getting older, and managing your finances must be getting complicated. The banks, the paperwork, all that bureaucracy. So I consulted with a lawyer, and he suggested that maybe it would be a good idea for you to give me power of attorney to help you with those things." Power of attorney. I acted confused, tilting my head like an old woman who doesn't understand complicated terms. "Yes, Mom. It's just a document that allows me to handle banking and legal matters for you, to make your life easier. That way, you don't have to be going to banks, signing complicated papers. I take care of everything." The smile he gave me was the same one he used when he was a child and wanted to convince me to buy him a toy. "Oh, how considerate of you, son." I took the folder and began to review the documents. They were exactly what I expected. A broad power of attorney that would give him total control over all my properties, bank accounts, and financial decisions. In other words, carte blanche to rob me legally. It's a bit technical, Mom. Don't worry about understanding everything. Basically, it just says, "I can help you with your things." Mason tried to take the papers from my hands, but I gripped them tighter. No, no, let me read. Your father always told me never to sign anything without reading it completely. I saw him tense up. The mention of his father, my late husband, always made him uncomfortable because deep down he knew his father would have been deeply disappointed in him. I read every word carefully while Mason and Harper watched me with growing impatience. The document was drafted deceptively, using complicated legal language to hide the fact that I would basically be stripping myself of all control over my own life. This says you could sell my properties without my consent, I said, pointing to a specific clause. No, Mom. That's only in case of emergency, if you couldn't make decisions for yourself. The lie came out so smooth. He had perfected the art of deception. And this part about you being able to make medical decisions for me. I pointed to another section. It's for your protection, Mom. Imagine you're in the hospital and can't communicate. Someone has to be able to decide for you. Harper intervened with that sweet, poisonous voice. I looked at both of them. I saw the anxiety in their eyes, the barely contained greed. They wanted me to sign right there, in that moment, before I could think too much or consult anyone else. And for a second, a single second, I considered signing the document just to see their faces when they discovered I had nothing to steal because I had already moved everything. But no, I had a better plan. You know what, son? You're right. This seems very useful. I saw them relax, exchanging looks of victory. But let me take it to my own lawyer so he can explain it to me better, just to be sure I understand everything. The mask cracked for an instant. Your lawyer? Mom, you don't need to spend money on a lawyer. I already consulted with one. I know, son. But your father always said that in legal matters, it's better to have a second opinion. Don't worry. It's not mistrust toward you. It's just caution. I smiled with all the sweetness in the world as I put the documents back in the folder. But, Mom, Mason tried to protest. It's decided. I'll take it tomorrow to the estate attorney who helped me with your Uncle Arthur's inheritance papers. I dropped that information casually like a bomb. I had avoided mentioning the inheritance for days, waiting for the perfect moment. The change in atmosphere was instant. Mason and Harper went rigid as statues. Inheritance? What inheritance? Mason's voice sounded sharp, almost hysterical. Oh, I hadn't told you? I acted surprised. Your Uncle Arthur left me some things when he died. I've been resolving the paperwork with the attorney these past weeks. That's why I've been out so much lately. What things did he leave you? Harper leaned forward, and the greed in her eyes was so obvious it almost made me laugh. Oh, well, the old farm he had in the country. You know, that dilapidated property that almost no one visited. I said it with a dismissive tone, as if it were worthless. And some money in the bank. Not much, just some savings. How much money? Mason didn't even try to hide his interest anymore. He had leaned forward, hands clenched on his knees, eyes shining with that avarice I could now see with crystal clarity. I'm not sure exactly. The lawyer told me an amount, but you know how I am with numbers. I touched my temple with a gesture of adorable confusion. I think he said something about 80,000, or maybe it was 18,000. Honestly, I don't remember well. I'd have to check the papers. The lie rolled off my tongue with an ease that surprised me. Decades of absolute honesty. And now I was lying as if I had been practicing my whole life. I saw them processing the information. $80,000 wasn't a fortune, but it wasn't a little bit of money either. Enough to pique their interest, but not enough for them to suspect I was hiding something bigger. Harper and Mason exchanged one of those couple looks that communicate without words, and I could read exactly what they were thinking. We need that money. Mom, that's wonderful. Mason stood up and hugged me, and the physical contact gave me chills. I'm so happy for you. Uncle Arthur was a good man. Yes, he was. Much better than his nephew, I thought. But I just smiled, and well, with that money you could do a lot of things. Harper joined the conversation with that honeyed voice she used when she wanted something. You could fix up the house, take that trip you've always wanted, or, she paused calculatedly, or you could help Mason and me with the down payment on our condo. You know, we've been looking for a place of our own. There it was. They didn't take 5 minutes to ask for money. They didn't even wait a day to pretend they were happy for me. Immediately, they thought of how they could benefit. Oh, I don't know, honey. I still have to see exactly how much it is and what I'm going to do with it. I played indecisive, the confused old lady who doesn't know how to handle money. Plus there's the farm. The lawyer says I could sell it, but I don't know if anyone would want to buy that old land. I could help you with that, Mom. Mason practically jumped at the offer. I could research buyers, handle the sale for you. It would be easier if you give me that power of attorney I showed you. That way I can do all the paperwork without bothering you. Of course, now the power of attorney wasn't just to rob me of the little they thought I had, but to steal the inheritance too. They wanted total control of everything. The magnitude of their greed knew no bounds. Let me think about it, son. It's all very recent, very overwhelming. I yawned exaggeratedly. I'm tired. I'm going to sleep. I got up with the folder of documents under my arm and went up the stairs to my room. From upstairs, I heard them speaking in urgent whispers. I lowered the volume of the TV I had left on in my room and pressed my ear to the door to hear better. This changes everything. Harper's voice sounded excited. If she has $80,000 plus the sale of the farm, we're talking about much more money than we thought. I know, but we have to be careful. She can't suspect anything. Mason sounded anxious but controlled. I'm going to investigate how much that farm is really worth. If it is where I think it is, it could easily be worth $200,000 or more. And do you think she'll give us the money if we ask for it? Harper doubted. Not all of it. She's stingy. She's always been stingy. She'll say she needs to save some for emergencies, for her old age. That's why I need her to sign that power of attorney. Once I have it, I can sell everything without her noticing until it's too late. I'll tell her the prices were lower than expected, that there were legal fees, that little was left after taxes. She knows nothing about those things. Stingy. He called me stingy. The woman who spent every last cent on him for decades, who drained her savings multiple times to help him, who worked until she got sick to give him everything. Stingy. But we have to act fast, continued Mason, before someone else gets into her head. Before that lawyer suggests she do something different with the money. Tomorrow I'm going to pressure her to sign. I'm going to tell her the lawyer needs the document urgently, that if we don't do it soon, there will be legal problems with the inheritance. Perfect. I'm going to take her shopping tomorrow. I'll keep her distracted, tired. When she gets home, she'll be so exhausted she'll sign whatever you put in front of her. Harper laughed. And that sound pierced me like a knife. This woman I treated like a daughter was deliberately planning to exhaust me, to manipulate me. You're brilliant, babe. Another kiss. More sounds of affection between two people conspiring against me. In 2 weeks, all this will be ours. The house, the inheritance money, everything. And she's going to be in that nursing home without knowing what happened. I moved away from the door and sat on my bed. My hands were shaking, but not from fear or sadness, from anticipation, from power, because they didn't know I knew. They didn't know that every word they uttered was only digging their grave deeper. They didn't know the money was already protected, that the house was about to be sold, that I had changed my will, that I had everything documented with lawyers and notaries. That night I barely slept. Not from anxiety, but from the pure adrenaline of knowing I was about to teach them the most important lesson of their lives. I stayed awake planning every detail of the final moment, that instant when I would reveal everything to them. It had to be perfect. It had to be devastating. It had to leave them without words, without excuses, without an exit. The next morning, Harper appeared in my room early, with a radiant smile. "Good morning, Mom. How about today you and I go shopping? It's been so long since we spent time together, just the two of us." "Oh, what a nice gesture, honey." I smiled with all the innocence I could manufacture. "I'd love that." We had breakfast, the three of us together. A breakfast she prepared for the first time in months. Scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice, all served with smiles and polite conversation. Mason asked me how I had slept, if I felt well, if I needed anything. The acting was so transparent now that I knew their true intentions, that it was hard not to laugh in their faces. Harper took me to the mall in her car. On the way, she talked nonstop about trivial things, keeping me entertained, establishing that false intimacy. We walked through stores for hours. She made me try on clothes she knew I would never buy, showed me expensive shoes, took me from one place to another until my feet genuinely started to hurt. "Tired, Mom?" she asked with that feigned concern when she saw me sitting on a bench in the mall. A little, yes. I don't have the energy I used to. I let my voice sound weak, fragile, letting her believe her plan was working. Poor thing. Let's go home so you can rest. She took my arm with that condescending delicacy used with the elderly, and we walked slowly toward the parking lot. In the car, while driving back, Harper began her real work. You know, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday regarding your brother's inheritance. Yes. I played distracted, looking out the window. It's a big responsibility to handle that much money at your age. Doesn't it scare you a little? I mean, with so many scammers out there, so many bad people who take advantage of seniors. Her voice dripped with false concern. I hadn't thought about that. I let a touch of anxiety color my voice. Do you think someone might try to rob me? It's possible, Mom. That's why I think it would be a good idea for you to let Mason help you. He's young, he understands these modern things, he knows how to protect money, and above all, he's your son. You can trust him completely. The words came out of her mouth with such conviction that for a moment I wondered if she really believed what she was saying, if she had rationalized her betrayal so much that she genuinely thought they were doing the right thing. I suppose you're right. I sighed as if I were considering it seriously. It's just that I'm a little scared to sign papers I don't fully understand. That's why you have to trust your family, Mom. We would never hurt you. We love you. She held my hand while driving, and the contact of her skin against mine gave me nausea. Those same hands that held me with fake affection had been planning my exile to a cheap nursing home. I looked out the car window while she kept talking, trying to convince me with sweet words and well-rehearsed lies. The streets passed quickly. The same streets I had traversed thousands of times over decades, coming and going from exhausting jobs, always thinking of giving my son a better future. And now that son saw me as an obstacle, as something disposable. When we got home, Mason was waiting in the living room with the same documents from the day before, but this time he had brought a mobile notary, a small man with a briefcase who introduced himself as Mr. Thompson. Mom, I'm glad you guys are here. Look, Mr. Thompson came so we can make the power of attorney official right today. That way you don't have to worry about anything anymore. Mason sounded excited, urgent. Mr. Thompson was a man of about 50, thin, with wire-rimmed glasses and a brown suit that had seen better days. He had that neutral expression of someone who has notarized thousands of documents without really caring about the content of any. He opened his briefcase and took out an official stamp, ink, and several additional sheets. Good afternoon, ma'am. He extended his hand with professional courtesy. Your son hired me to come certify some documents. It's a quick process. It won't take more than 10 minutes. How kind of you to come all the way here. I shook his hand and sat in my favorite rocking chair, acting like the tired old lady who had just arrived from an exhausting day of shopping. May I see the documents first? Mason tensed visibly. Mom, they're the same ones I showed you yesterday. Mr. Thompson is in a hurry. He has other clients waiting. There's no rush, Mason. Mr. Thompson passed me the documents with a professional smile. The lady has every right to review what she is going to sign. In fact, it is my obligation to ensure she understands completely. I saw Mason clench his fists. His plan was getting complicated. I took the papers and began to read them slowly, very slowly, running my finger along every line as if I needed help following the text. The silence in the living room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. This says my son would have total control over all my bank accounts, I said after a moment, pointing to a specific clause. That is correct, ma'am. It is a general power of attorney. Mr. Thompson nodded. And could he sell my house without consulting me? Technically, yes, if the document is signed as currently drafted. The notary kept his neutral tone, but I saw a glint of something in his eyes, maybe discomfort, maybe suspicion. I see. I kept reading. And medical decisions? He could decide to commit me somewhere if he wanted. Mom, please. Mason intervened with a tense voice. You're misinterpreting everything. This is just to help you, to make your life easier. I just want to understand, son. I looked at him with those innocent mother eyes he knew so well. It's just that your father always taught me to be careful with these topics. Harper shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. Mr. Thompson watched us all with growing professional interest. The tension in the room was palpable. I continued reading every word, every clause, every bit of fine print. I took my time. I asked questions. I asked for clarifications. I saw Mason getting more and more desperate, Harper biting her lower lip until almost making it bleed, the notary starting to realize something didn't add up in this situation. Finally, after almost 30 minutes of meticulous review, I closed the folder and handed it back to Mason. I'm not going to sign this today. The silence that followed was absolute. Mason froze with the folder in his hands, his face going through a spectrum of emotions: confusion, frustration, contained rage. What? Why not? His voice came out sharper than he intended. Because I want my own lawyer to review it first. I told you yesterday, son, it's not mistrust, it's prudence. I kept my tone soft, reasonable, completely calm. But Mom, Mr. Thompson is already here. I already paid for his time. Mason was losing his composure. And I will pay him too, for the trouble of coming without a result. I took out my wallet and extracted several bills. What is your fee, Mr. Thompson? The notary looked at the bills, then at Mason, then at me. Something in his expression changed. It's $100, ma'am. But the young man already paid in advance. Then take this as additional compensation for making you come out here for nothing. I handed him $150. The man took them, packed his things in the briefcase, and said goodbye with a professional courtesy that didn't include promises to return. When the door closed behind Mr. Thompson, the atmosphere in the living room changed radically. Mason dropped the folder on the coffee table harder than necessary. Harper crossed her arms. Both looked at me with a hostility they didn't even try to hide completely anymore. I don't understand why you're being so difficult with this. Mason paced from one side to the other like a caged animal. I am literally just trying to help you, and I appreciate it, son, but I need time to think it over properly. I got up from my chair with an exaggerated groan. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm exhausted. I'm going to lie down for a while. I went up to my room, leaving them downstairs with their frustration. I lay on the bed, but not to rest, but to think. The moment had arrived. I could no longer prolong this farce. Every day I spent in this house, pretending normality with these two people who planned to destroy me, sickened my soul a little more. From my room, I could hear their voices rising in argument. They weren't trying to lower the volume. They probably thought I was so tired I had fallen asleep immediately. I told you we had to pressure her more. Harper's voice pierced the walls. Now she's suspecting something. I saw how she looked at us. She's not suspecting anything. She's just stubborn, like she's always been. Mason sounded frustrated, defeated. But eventually she'll sign. She has no other choice. And what if she never signs? What if that damn notary told her something that put her on alert? Harper was panicking. Then we go to Plan B. We declare her mentally incompetent. I already explained it to you. But Mason's voice didn't sound as sure as before. I sat up in bed and took out my phone. I called Sarah, the real estate agent. We already have offers for the house. Miss Eleanor, I was just about to call you. We have 3 excellent offers. The highest is for $335,000. A young couple who is willing to close the deal in 2 weeks and accepts the property as is. Her voice sounded excited. I accept. Prepare all the documents. My voice was firm, decided. Perfect. Do you want us to coordinate a date for the couple to see the property? It's not necessary. They already saw it in the photos and the video you sent them, correct? Yes, but usually buyers want to see in person before. Tell them I have to sell fast for personal reasons. If they are willing to close without more visits, I'll drop $5,000, $330,000. Deal closed in 2 weeks. I was willing to lose a little money in exchange for speed. Sarah paused. Let me contact them. I'll call you in an hour. 40 minutes later, my phone rang. They accepted. They want to close in 10 days, if possible. They have the cash ready. Perfect. Proceed with everything. I hung up and stared at the ceiling of my room. 10 days. In 10 days this house would no longer be mine, but it wouldn't be theirs either. It would never be theirs. I also called my lawyer, the same one who had handled Arthur's inheritance. I need you to prepare a formal letter for my son, informing him that he has 30 days to vacate the property once the sale is finalized. Are you sure about this, Miss Eleanor? His voice had a tone of paternal concern. Completely sure. And I also need you to be present when I communicate it to him. I want everything legally documented. Understood. I'll prepare everything. The following days were an exercise in absolute control. Mason tried several more times to get me to sign the power of attorney, each time with different arguments. That the lawyer had found problems with the inheritance requiring immediate action. That there was an investment opportunity we couldn't pass up. That the bank was asking questions about Arthur's money. All lies. And I let them fall without effect. I already told you I'm going to review it with my lawyer. Son, have patience. And every time I said it, I saw his frustration grow a little more. Harper changed tactics. She became even sweeter, more attentive, cooking my favorite meals, offering to help me with everything. Mom, let me take you to the bank tomorrow. We can review your accounts together, organize everything. It would be fun. A girl's day. I rejected every offer with politeness, and I saw how behind her smile, resentment grew. I packed my things in secret, only the essentials. Clothes, important documents, some photographs of when Mason was a child and still loved me genuinely. I left everything else. The furniture, the ceramic ornaments they despised so much, the crocheted doilies. Let them do whatever they wanted with all that. I didn't need it anymore. Day 9 arrived. Tomorrow would be the closing of the house sale. This night would be my last night sleeping here. And I had decided that this night would also be the night I would tell them everything. I sat in front of the mirror in my room and looked at myself really for the first time in years. There was Eleanor, 68 years old, with wrinkles that told stories of suffering and sacrifice, gray hair that was once jet black, hands rough and marked by decades of hard work. But in my eyes, I saw something new. Fierceness, determination, power. I put on my dark green dress, the one I saved for special occasions. I combed my hair with care. I put on light makeup. I wanted to look dignified for this moment. I wanted them to remember this image of me not as the victim they planned to create, but as the strong woman I always was, but whom they never knew how to appreciate. I went downstairs at 7 in the evening. Mason and Harper were in the living room watching television, as always. When they saw me enter dressed up, they looked at me with surprise. "Are you going out, Mom?" asked Mason. "No. We are going to eat dinner, the three of us together, tonight. I have something important to tell you." My voice had a quality they hadn't heard before. Authority. Control. I prepared dinner myself that night. It wasn't anything elaborate, just pasta with tomato sauce and salad, but I did it with hands steadier than I'd had in weeks. I set the table carefully, using the cream-colored tablecloth I reserved for special occasions. The good plates I almost never took out. The wine glasses that were a wedding gift almost 40 years ago. Everything had to be perfect for this moment. Mason and Harper sat at the table with confused expressions. It wasn't normal for me to do all this on a random weekday. They looked at me with that mix of curiosity and suspicion, trying to decipher what was happening. "This looks very fancy, Mom." Mason tried to sound casual, but I detected the tension in his voice. "Is there a special occasion?" "Yes, there is." I served the pasta on each plate with deliberate, calm movements. "Today is a very important day. The day several things come to an end." Harper and Mason exchanged looks. "What do you mean?" she asked. I sat in my place at the head of the table, the position I had always occupied in this house. I folded my hands on my lap and looked them directly in the eyes, first one, then the other. The silence stretched for several seconds. I let the tension grow, let them feel uncomfortable. Exactly 11 days ago, I began with a clear and controlled voice. I arrived at this house after receiving the most wonderful news of my life. My brother Arthur had left me an inheritance, not the $80,000 I mentioned to you. I paused and saw how they leaned forward, attentive. But $850,000 in cash, plus an entire farm of 500 acres. The shock on their faces was instant. Their jaws literally dropped. Harper dropped the fork she had lifted. Mason froze mid-movement. "I came running home that day," I continued, without averting my gaze, excited like a little girl, imagining the joy on your faces when I told you, thinking about everything we could do together with that money. about how I could finally help you significantly after years of struggle. My voice remained even, without emotion, just stating facts. But when I got to the door of this house, I heard voices coming from the open window. Your voices. I saw the color drain from their faces. Mason opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. No, now it's my turn to speak. You already had enough time. The tone of my voice was steel. I heard you planning how to put me in a nursing home for $2,000 a month. I heard you discussing how to keep my Social Security check. I heard Harper call me an old cockroach, say that my mothball smell gave her nausea, that she was tired of pretending she cared. Harper turned pale as paper. Eleanor, I heard my son. My voice broke slightly here, but I composed myself. The son I carried in my womb, whom I nursed, for whom I sacrificed everything, say that it would be easier if I got sick soon, that I had already lived my life, that he wouldn't spend money on treatments for me because it wasn't worth it. Mom, that's not. Mason tried to interrupt, his face now red with shame and panic. Silence! My voice resonated in the dining room with an authority I had never used before. I heard every word of your plan to rob me of this house using a fraudulent power of attorney. I heard how you planned to sell it without me realizing and keep the money. I heard you call me stupid, stingy, a dead weight. Every word came out of my mouth like a bullet. And I decided in that moment that the naive Eleanor, the self-sacrificing mother who forgives everything, had died. In her place, someone new was born. Someone who was finally going to think of herself first. I got up from the chair and walked to the window, turning my back on them for a moment to regain composure. When I turned around, my eyes were dry but shining with determination. These last few days have been very productive for me. I began to walk slowly around the table, like a lawyer presenting evidence to the jury. I hired the best financial advisor in the city. I invested the $850,000 in a way that generates approximately $4,500 a month in passive income. I changed my will with a certified estate attorney. My son Mason is completely disinherited. My entire estate will go to a foundation that helps single mothers in vulnerable situations, women like I was once. Mason stood up abruptly. You can't do that. I'm your only son. I can and I did. It is already signed, sealed, and legally registered. My voice didn't tremble. I also hired a real estate agent. This house, the house you planned to steal from me, was sold 3 days ago. The closing of the sale is tomorrow at 10 in the morning, for $330,000. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see their brains processing the information, calculating, panicking. 330,000, Harper whispered, doing the mental math of everything they had just lost. That's right. And before you ask, no, you won't see a cent of that money either. I took an envelope out of my pocket and let it drop onto the table. This is a legal eviction notice. You have exactly 30 days starting tomorrow to remove all your belongings and find another place to live. But we have nowhere to go. We have no money, Mason shouted, and the desperation in his voice was real. How interesting. I crossed my arms, because I didn't have money either when I was widowed at 30 with a 4-year-old child. And somehow I survived. I worked 3 simultaneous jobs. I slept 4 hours a night for years. I literally broke my back, so you would have food, education, opportunities. My voice rose in volume, and I did it alone, without complaining, without planning to betray anyone, without thinking about sticking my son in a nursing home when he became inconvenient. Mom, please. Mason approached with hands outstretched, and for the first time in days I saw real tears in his eyes. I know I made a terrible mistake. I know what we said was unforgivable, but we didn't plan to do it really. We were just venting, frustrated. You know how it is when people are under financial stress. A mistake? I laughed, and the sound came out bitter, dry. A mistake is forgetting to buy milk at the supermarket. What you two did was meticulously plan how to defraud, rob, and abandon me. You brought a notary to this house to make me sign fraudulent documents. Harper took me shopping with the specific purpose of exhausting me so I would be too tired to think clearly. That is not a mistake, son. That is premeditated malice. Harper stood up too, with tears running down her cheeks. Please, Eleanor. I know I was horrible. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But don't do this to us. We are family, family. I repeated the word as if it were poison in my mouth. Family doesn't plan to lock their loved ones in cheap nursing homes to keep a $1,200 check. Family doesn't call the person who gave them a roof when they had nothing a cockroach. Family doesn't calculate how long you will take to die so they can keep your things. I approached Mason until I was inches from his face. I looked him directly in the eyes, those eyes that once looked with genuine love when he was a child. I gave you everything. Absolutely everything. My youth, my health, my dreams, my opportunities, my money, my time, my love. And you took it as if it were your right, as if I owed you all that simply for having been born. My voice broke slightly, but I continued. You never learned the value of sacrifice because you never had to sacrifice anything. I gave you everything so easily that you thought that was how the world worked, that people simply give you things without even expecting respect in return. I'm sorry. Mason was crying openly now. I'm so sorry, Mom. You're right about everything. I was a horrible son, a horrible human being, but give me a chance to fix it, please. There is nothing to fix. My voice was final, definitive. It's already done. Tomorrow I sign the sale papers. The day after tomorrow, I move to my brother's farm. I already hired workers to restore it. I already spoke with the neighbors in the nearby town. I am going to live the rest of my life in peace, surrounded by nature, with enough money to never worry again. I am going to have the life I deserved to have decades ago. I turned around and began to climb the stairs to my room. Their voices followed me, pleading, crying, but I didn't care anymore. I reached my room and locked the door. The next morning, I woke up at 6. I went down with my suitcase already packed. They were still asleep, exhausted from the night of crying and drama. I left the house keys on the dining table, along with the eviction notice and a final note that simply said, "Learn to value people before you lose them." I walked out of that house for the last time, feeling the weight of decades of sacrifice finally lifting from my shoulders. The morning sun greeted me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with fresh, clean air. I drove toward my new life with a smile on my lips, a smile of freedom, of justice, of rebirth. At 68 years old, for the first time in my existence, I was going to live for myself, and it felt glorious.